Good to be with you all tonight. I'm Andrew Villeneuve. I'm the WordPress community supervisor, organizer type person. I've been doing this with Chandrika for a few months now, but Chandrika is actually moving. So we're going to be looking for a new co-organizer for all the meetups. So if anyone is interested, definitely talk to me. But I've been involved in the Seattle WordPress community for many years, and I've been doing a lot of security consulting in that time as well. Just skip over the copyright page here. This is about me in 30 seconds. I'm a lifelong Washingtonian. I have a lot of interests. Among them are politics, technology, travel, etc. I founded the Northwest Progressive Institute, which is a political strategy center. I was a columnist for Reporter newspapers some years ago, since given that up. I continue to work on my business degree, and I'm still blogging using WordPress for that. This is where I can be found. My website is andrewvilleneuve.com. NPI's website is nwprogressive.org. You can use the short URL if you want from a phone or tablet, and I'm on the typical social media channels. So I became a security consultant because I was called on several times to help people who had websites hacked. And I imagine you've all probably had a client or somebody who said, help me, my website's been hacked, and I don't know what to do. And that is a typical situation that we see. In security these days is people get hacked and they didn't take the necessary precautions, and so now they need to recover their data, their reputation. And that's difficult work, but it's important work, because the house may be burning, but try to say what you can and put it out. I really became interested in security when I unhacked these sites, because it led me to realize that there is a whole lot of unprotected data out there. And if you think about it, a website in many ways is like a house. And if you just leave the doors unlocked and the windows open, and you don't put a guard dog in, and you don't put alarms in, and so forth, your house can be pretty easily burglarized, right? Or defaced, or something else. So a house and a website are not the same thing, but there's a lot of similarities. There's good metaphor. And a lot of people don't realize when they first set up WordPress, if you don't protect it, it's kind of like leaving that house unlocked. It's like not taking precautions. So I always tell people an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Now, I would like to focus specifically on how you can protect yourself using HTTPS, because this is a technology that allows data to be encrypted in transit and thus protect from man-in-the-middle attacks. And we're seeing HTTPS get adopted very rapidly. Now, I'm sure you've noticed it in your work, that it is becoming the choice of anyone who's a technologist. It's becoming the choice of a lot of companies and nonprofits. Are just doing it voluntarily, not because they have to, because they're choosing to. Some businesses have to. If you operate a business that takes credit cards, for example, you have to comply with something called PCI DSS, Data Security Standards. Woohoo! If you've ever read the manuals for those, hopefully you've never had to, but if you have, then you know there are a million different things to think about. Those standards are about as mind-numbing as anything else that I could possibly imagine. And the manuals are boring too. They're extremely boring. But the safeguards that they require are there for a reason. They don't want card data being leaked, stolen, breached, etc. I think of all the people out there using credit cards, either taking them or processing them, very few firms are probably actually complying with all the standards. So people who wrote them had a lot of good ideas in mind, but I don't think they're all widely utilized in practice. That's why you see all the data breaches. You know, Chipotle just had a data breach a few days ago, and I pay attention to things like that. And that was in their stores. But that gets you thinking, well, how is this data being stolen? And a lot of the times it's because technologies like HTTPS aren't being used when they could be. So what can it do? Well, as I said, it can encrypt data. It's a great means of encrypting data in transit. This is what the acronym stands for, Hypertext Transfer Protocol with TLS. It can stop those man-in-the-middle attacks for eavesdropping. And we actually have two built-in modes in WordPress for HTTPS support. There's one that just does it for logins, and the other that just does it for all the administrative sessions. The first mode is basically deprecated at this point. Nobody really uses it anymore, because if you can afford to use HTTPS to encrypt logins, why wouldn't you just encrypt your entire administrative session? So I don't recommend doing it just for logins. If you're going to deploy it, you deploy it for your entire session. And it used to be people were worried about things like slowness, but we're past that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. A few words about SSL, though. That is an old deprecated term. I see a lot of people out there using words like SSL certificates. I would encourage you not to say SSL at all, because it does confuse people. Think about it from the perspective of a newcomer, someone who's just getting into web tech, just getting into WordPress. If they hear SSL, they will go research what that means, because it seems to be an initialism, right? And it is. Secure Sockets Layer is what it stands for. Problem is, that's deprecated now. Nobody's supposed to use SSL anymore. It's bad. It has weaknesses, known vulnerabilities. It's got a replacement, TLS, Transport Layer Security. Problem is, you say SSL, people aren't going to realize that you mean TLS necessarily. So it's better just to say secure. Secure certificates, secure hosting. That way, whatever technology we end up using to protect our data, it'll be current term, right? One and done. Secure hosting will be good forever. Secure certificates will be good forever. So performance, as I said, there's really no need to worry about it. Using HTTPS is not going to slow down your WordPress backend at all. There's really no performance difference at all. Years ago, there was a concern that if you used it, it would slow you down. Now, there are still some extreme niche cases where HTTPS will be a drag. And one of those that I can think of is if you're using satellite internet, they compress web pages, and that compression doesn't work if you use HTTPS. So someone on a satellite internet connection may find your HTTPS website to be slower, but that's a tiny fraction of users. And quite frankly, it's the satellite companies that provide that satellite internet service need to figure out how to speed up their connections, because using that old compression technique as a shortcut to speed up the data delivery is not going to work in the modern web, given that everything is encrypted now. So if you're going to buy a ticket from an airline, it's going to be over HTTPS. If you're going to log into Facebook, it's going to be HTTPS. So the burden's really on them to fix that. We don't have to worry about that. How do we turn it on? Well, we've got to do it after we take care of some prerequisites. Can't just do it right away. So the first one is to get secure hosting from your host. That might require getting a unique IP address. Shouldn't, but it might. Depends on how old and crumbly your host is. But you should get secure hosting set up first. Then you're going to need to get a certificate, secure certificate. You must have that in place to avoid certificate errors and trust warnings. So you know that old error you get in Firefox. Warning, this site is not secure. Do not proceed. Go back to safety. That's what people will see unless you have your certificate installed. And it's got to be a production-ready certificate. Self-signed certs are going to generate those warnings. Now, if you're just running a test environment and it's only you don't need to worry about getting the certificate. Self-signed, you just bypass the warning and one and done. But to somebody who is just a regular layperson, they're not going to understand that the warning is innocuous. They're going to think, oh gosh, this is bad, I better get out of here. So it's very important for any production site to have a fully prepared HTTPS compliant certificate installed. And you can get it from any number of companies. There's a bit of a beef going on right now between Google and Symantec about their certificates. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. There's a big argument going on where Google has accused Symantec of failing to really do its due diligence when they issue certificates, and so they're saying they're going to start untrusting Symantec certificates. So if that is of concern to you, don't buy a Symantec certificate. And there are a lot of companies that Symantec owns, so you have to avoid doing business with any of them if you want to avoid that potential spat between Google and Symantec. You can look at Komodo, that's one option. There are others out there. There's quite a few companies in the industry. Komodo is probably the industry leader at this point. They have the most market share. And then you also have the option, if you want a free certificate, there is a new certificate authority called Let's Encrypt. Everyone heard of Let's Encrypt? Fresh Consulting uses Let's Encrypt. So I imagine you've heard of it. So once you do those two things, you're ready to go, you can turn it on. And this is what you do to turn it on. You go and edit your WP config, and you drop in this line. Now notice, this is harkening back to the days when we used SSL, hence the constant has SSL in it, force SSL admin. I'm hoping at some point we will drop that SSL. We will just say force secure admin or something like that to make it less confusing for people. But that's what it is for now. So you drop this one line of code in, and what WordPress will then do is it will start enforcing HTTPS on all of your admin page requests. So every time you go into the admin, do anything like use the customizer or maybe you want to install a plugin, or any number of things you would do in the admin, it's going to be over an encrypted connection. And of course, your credentials are being transmitted encrypted, so they're not being sent in the clear. This is particularly valuable if you're working out of some public Wi-Fi hotspot, because you don't know who else is sniffing your traffic, right? You can't know that. If you're communicating wirelessly from a computer, like at a Starbucks or something, you're working on a site, every time you make or send a request, you're sending information back and forth, and if that information is not encrypted while in transit, somebody could get a hold of it. And that is how your site can be breached. It's bad. Or a client site. So it's very important to make sure this constant is added in, because that's what protects you. So you won't accidentally log in to your site and forget to put in the S. So WordPress and the server will do that for you. If you accidentally forget the S will be added, and you'll be encrypted. So you can use it on your front end as well. You don't just have to limit yourself to the back end. You can actually encrypt the entire site, so anybody who comes to the site would do so over an encrypted connection. But you have to set up the secure hosting first, as I said, and then you need to do a few more things. This is the tricky part. If the site is being set up for the very first time and you do it over HTTPS, that is the best, because then WordPress, from the beginning, will be using TLS, the latest version of secure technologies for encrypting data in transit. But if it's an older site and people have not been in the habit of using these technologies before, then there's more work involved, because usually there's some content that's been put into the site, right? The database has accumulated some posts, some pages, some options, a bunch of things, and many of those entries in that database may have hard-coded HTTP URLs without the S. So you actually have to go in and change those references, because otherwise your site will give mixed content warnings. It will say things like, this site is not fully secure, some elements are not encrypted. I'm sure you've all seen those mixed content browser warnings at some point, and that's what they're referring to. So you have to do several things. One, you go into the general settings and you change the URLs for the home and the site to be HTTPS based. You put in that prefix. And then you're going to have to go through the database and find all the references. There are a couple plugins that make this super easy. There's a Velvet Blues update URLs that does it, where you can install a plugin and then just go through your database and replace all references. You have to make sure that you put the URLs in correctly, so the old URLs and then the new URLs that will begin with the HTTPS prefix. You also have to make a backup before you do that, because if something goes wrong, you want to restore quickly to what it was and then try again. And then you can instruct Apache, Nginx, whatever you're using, to redirect all of your HTTP traffic, and there are recipes for doing this. I don't like recommending recipes in a presentation, because some servers will take one recipe and then others won't. I mean, even different versions of Apache are finicky, so you kind of have to test it first. Before you go to production, you have to test it, and you have to test it on an identical server. So if you're running, let's say, Apache 2.2 something, then you need to test in a local environment that's also running that. Don't test in a local environment that's running Apache 2.4 and then try to go live to an environment that's running a different version of Apache. That can be a recipe for problems. And obviously, your Nginx recipe is going to be different than your Apache recipe. But that's how you do it. That's how you can encrypt your front end. And I fully recommend doing that front-end encryption. So when you're putting together theme code, plugin code, I like to say, the best plan is to use either HTTPS, or you can use just the 2 slashes, which is basically a prefix agnostic. So it'll run over whichever protocol the browser wants to use. But what you absolutely don't want to do is have hard-coded HTTP references, because if you do that, then you will inevitably get those mixed content warnings. Another reason that I should mention for going HTTPS on your front end is that if your server supports it, you can take advantage of the new HTTP version, HTTP 2. And this has all sorts of benefits. It's a new technology. It's widely supported in browsers. It's just starting to come to servers. And it's now supported to some extent by some hosts. SiteGround supports it, for example. Other hosts are a little slower on the uptake, but it is starting to get out there. And what it offers is all the old tricks that we used to try to get browsers to speed up the loading of sites, now we don't have to worry about those anymore. So like domain pipelining and other tricks that we used to use, HTTP2 makes those tricks unnecessary. However, there's a catch. HTTP2 will not be supported in the browser unless your site is secure. So if you're not on secure hosting, the browser will fall back to old HTTP 1.1. So in order to take advantage of all that new cool stuff that HTTP2 can do, your site must be secure. So that's another reason to go HTTPS. And then I would definitely recommend making use of all your browser development tools to aid you in getting rid of all these mixed content warnings. You can use the Firefox console, the Chrome console, find out where your references are that you need to change. But let's talk a little bit about hosting, because for me, this is the biggest barrier for my clients to going HTTPS, is their host doesn't make it very easy for them. Some hosts are on really outdated stacks. Anybody come across a client recently who was on a server with PHP 5.2? No? I did. But I guess maybe that's just because being a security consultant, I end up with those types of projects. But it scared me. I was like, how is this possible? And it was a GoDaddy server, by the way. I just couldn't believe it. How could they not have upgraded? But the client was on PHP 5.2, and I said, well, the best I can do is get you to PHP 5.3 because that's the only other version that's offered. Even that's deprecated. So I said, really, you should be on PHP 7, which is the new stable branch, and there's also 7.1 available. But anything older than that is basically at this point end of life. 5.6 will be supported for a little while longer. So always make sure that you do your research if you're picking a web host for a client, or if you're trying to figure out what to do with a client. You don't want to be on an outdated server stack. There are a bunch of vulnerabilities out there. You've probably heard of Heartbleed, Shellshock, Poodle, etc. Those bugs are well known. There are patches available, but some hosts just aren't responsible and haven't gotten around to patching them. So when you have hosting issues trying to find a new host, I say, given the number of hosts that are out there and available and do a good job, why would you pick one that does a bad job? So there are some hosts that actually take HTTPS very, very seriously, meaning that they want you to have it, they encourage you to have it, they go out of their way to make sure that you can have it. DreamHost and InMotion, WebFaction, and SiteGround are all in that category. Rackspace is okay. WP Engine is an okay choice for managed hosting. Probably the worst offender is GoDaddy. GoDaddy always wants to sell you a $70 package for certificate and unique IP and all that. You don't need that. You can go secure only without needing those add-ons. Certificates are free now with Let's Encrypt, and thanks to server name indication, we don't have to get unique IPs. There just aren't that many old legacy browsers and platforms that will crash if they encounter a server that is on SNI. So I mean, if you're on Android Gingerbread or Internet Explorer 7 or 6 or something like that, yes, your browser will have a problem going to a site that is running on SNI, server name indication. But there are so few people left on those platforms. We just can't compromise all of our security for the sake of 1% of people in the market. So, and that's a good message to them too. They need to upgrade their computing environment. So I don't recommend GoDaddy. I don't recommend a lot of the EIG hosts. Bluehost is getting a bit better. I will say I do give them credit for, they're now offering free certificates through Komodo. I think they're responding to the Let's Encrypt phenomenon, but they actually now are offering, if you have a WordPress site on Bluehost, they'll give you a free Komodo certificate. They didn't used to do that, but I think they're responding to Let's Encrypt. They don't want their customers to leave. So if you're on Bluehost and you get that offer, take it. Get the certificate. Unmanaged hosting is another way you can go. There are a lot of options for unmanaged hosting. You've got the heavyweights like Amazon, Microsoft Azure, Linode, UpCloud, DigitalOcean. I'm kind of fond of DigitalOcean and Linode. Linode just dropped their prices, so they're becoming attractive. You don't get HTTPS set up by default with any of these unmanaged hosts. You have to do the work. You have to configure it. And ServerPilot can help you with that. Also, there is a tool that Let's Encrypt offers, CertBot. If you deploy CertBot on your unmanaged VPS, you will be able to quickly get a certificate from Let's Encrypt, assuming that your domain is correctly set up. You will get one within seconds. You just type in a couple short commands on the command line and it'll do it. And then you can set up a cron job to renew the certificate if you like. But there are a bunch of different ways that you can implement a Let's Encrypt certificate. There's more than one client. Certbot is probably the most widely used, but there are other choices. And if you're going to stick with managed hosting, you just have to evaluate the environment. Ask how modern is the server stack. Most hosts don't really tell you up front, so you kind of have to ask their salespeople, what do you run? And then if they don't know, they say, ask the technical people, ask the IT division, what do you run? That way you'll know. And how transparent are they? Do they keep a status blog where they report their downtime? Are they accountable? And of course, is SSH readily available? I mean, if it's me, I would never get hosting without SSH. It's the developer's best friend. Why would you not have that? And you know, some hosts like DreamHost are now installing WP CLI by default. That's great. Although I noticed they don't have the WP Vuln add-on yet, so I will bug them about that, see if I can get that added. And then let's move on from this topic and just talk about a couple of other related topics. First, backing up and upgrading. I can't believe how many sites I come across that don't have backup set up. It seems like they should be, but they're not. But you really need to back up, and you want to do it automatically. You don't want to do it manually, except if you're going to do some kind of upgrade and you just want a fresh backup, really fresh. But you should have an automatic system that does it for you. If you don't, you're going to forget. Nobody can remember backup as often as they should. So you never want to rely on your host solution, because if you do, then inevitably the host backup will go missing, or it won't be as recent as you want, or whatnot. So you want to do the automatic backups, and they should be under your control. And remember, your offsite backups are your insurance. So you might have on-site backups that are on the server that you can restore quickly, but then you also have off-site backup. You can do that a number of ways. Automatic sells VaultPress for a fee. You can get that. Or you can use a plugin like Updraft Plus to send your backups to Amazon S3 or Dropbox or somewhere. But you should make sure whatever it is you're doing that it works, right? You should actually test the backups. Try and restore and see if it comes back to you, if the database and the file system are good. And if they are, then you know that your solution is working. The worst time to find out that your backup isn't good backup is when you need it. And then if you're backing up manually, obviously, as developers, we know we can do it from the command line. There's just a few commands. We can create a tar archive of the file system if we want. We can zip it up if we want. And then we can export our database. And of course, you can use the MySQL P flag to avoid typing your password right on the command line. That way you type it in separately so that it doesn't create a record in your bash history of what your password is. And updating was discussed earlier, but it's really nice to be able to update automatically or through the command line if you can. I always tell my lay people, clients, that just use the built-in updater. It's pretty good. Subversion is the old way to do it, and some people still do it that way. WordPress won't actually auto-update you if you have Subversion installed, fun fact.
Or Git.
Huh?
Or Git.
Or Git, right. There's no excuse for not upgrading. I have run into like 1 out of 1,000 upgrades fails because something became incompatible. Usually it's like a really badly coded theme or plugin, but 99% of the time upgrading is not going to cause a problem in my experience. And I've worked on tons of different sites and tons of different hosting environments. People are like, well, what happens if the upgrade fails? And I said, well, then we'll revert, but it's not going to fail. Okay, the chances of that are so remote because most plugin developers don't want to write crummy code. They want to put together a good working plugin that will be of good service to the WordPress community. And most people who are responsible regularly push updates to their plugins. So you needn't worry that your site's going to fall apart just because we're upgrading to a new version of WordPress. Minor version upgrades are particularly safe and problem-free most of the time. Major upgrades may be different, depends on, again, how well the site is architected. Most of the time, there's just no problems. So as a general rule of thumb, you don't want to access WordPress from shared or public computers. You don't know what's on them. So here I'm talking about like cyber cafes, right? Your classic situation where it's a computer that somebody else was using. You have no idea what's on it. There could be a keylogger or anything else. So don't use it to access your important data. Now, if you were just running like, I don't know, a Google or Bing search about the news or something, then I guess a cyber cafe won't really hurt. but this is not the place where you log in to do work on your WordPress website. And it's also better not to use Wi-Fi and a public hotspot for logging into WordPress unless you are using HTTPS, and then you've got some protection. You can also turn on VPN for even more protection. And certainly don't borrow somebody else's computer unless you trust them. And it's a good idea to check to see if it's malware-free. You can just say, hey, as a friend, can I run a virus scan on your computer to see if things are okay? And virus scans aren't foolproof, but it gives you some idea, doesn't it, of what's on there. Now let's talk a little bit about building a web application firewall. This is actually not a difficult thing to do. A lot of people think it must be really hard, but there are actually tools that automate it. And we all love to save time, so if we have a tool that can automate something, why not use it? And in the case of building a web application firewall, we've got tools that will expedite the job. And my favorite happens to be WordFence Security. It's a great plugin, very popular, used widely in the WordPress world, and it will deploy a firewall for you. And that firewall will be capable of intercepting a lot of bad requests and thus safeguarding your WordPress website. You can deploy it in a few clicks. There's a number of different server configurations that it can anticipate. So most of the time it just requires you to do a little bit of clicking. You have to back up your HTTPS file if you're on Apache, and then it deploys, and then you can get confirmation that it's working. And then you have the additional ability to configure it further if you so desire. And of course, with it being predominantly PHP and htaccess based, that's the mechanisms by which it puts its rules into effect. You can look at it and see what it's doing, and you can see what the rules are and how they're written and so forth. And if you have feedback for the WordFence team, you can certainly give it to them. They're very receptive to that in my experience. So that's the primary way. There are other plugins that do it. Bulletproof Security is another option, but WordFence is really becoming the all-in-one Swiss Army knife security tool for WordPress, and does a lot of things really well. So that's my presentation. Here's how you can contact me, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Tell me about the difference between WordFence and something like the security subscription WAF, where you're actually running it through their servers. So does WordFence, how does WordFence stay updated with new vulnerabilities, for example?
Well, there's two WordFence modes, and mode A is like the free version, and that's not as comparable to the other options that are out there like Sakuri. The premium version gives you that real-time sort of cloud-based protection, they like to call it.
Okay.
And that's what you pay for. And I think the other options in the market are comparable in terms of, you pay a subscription, you get that protection. But the primary thing about the free version is if you don't want to pay for that service, then at least you're getting something.
Okay, so it's still worthwhile, you would say?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a lot of people on the free version, and it works quite well. And the paid version just gets you more. So what I like to tell people is I say, look at your site's traffic. Look at your site's reputation on the internet. The more traffic you have, the more visitors, the more sense it makes to invest in a more premium solution, right? So if you're a well-trafficked business, medium-sized enterprise, let's say, you couldn't afford any downtime, that's when you want to invest in more tools, more capacity, more power. So you might get WordFence Premium or Sakuri, one or the other. You might get, let's say, you might have Amazon Route 53, so that if you lost one of your servers, you could actually send all of your site's traffic to a different server. The same website set up and running. Obviously, it would need to be synchronized or something in order for that to work. But you could have a failover system so that you would have no downtime. Those are the kind of things you invest in if you have a mission-critical business. But if you're just running, let's say, I don't know, a hobby site, and it's just your personal blog, and it goes down, well, presumably you'll get it back up, but it's not the end of the world if it's down for a few hours, right?
Nice.
So, yeah, I think when you go and look at WordFence and Sakuri, they're both kind of similar products, and the paid options both get you similar return.
Cool, thanks.